In this video, I'm going to convert our store SQL, which you should have done, into a JPA model that uses no SQL for us. Makes it much easier to do the persistence. So the first thing I'm going to do is copy my store SQL into a store with JPA folder. I'm going to rename this folder. So I've got it there. I'm going to start up NetBeans. So I'm going to open that project. Right now it's called Store SQL. First thing I'm going to do is rename it. So I'm going to rename. I'm just going to call this Store and rename the project folder. Okay, I'm going to follow the notes that I have posted also. So basically this is going to quickly go through what the notes show. So I've copied my project and I want to generate entities from my existing database. So I'm going to go out here and make sure I have my database connected, start up my server, come back to my project. Here I have source packages and entity. This is my old category and category SQL. Just going to wipe those out. So I can right click on this and say new. Now I want entity classes from database. If it doesn't show up in this list, you can go to other, persistence, entity classes from database. So we need the database connection. Here's my store user. I started my database. So it finds all of my tables. I want to add them all. Say next. Okay. Here's what it's going to generate for me, which is fine. It's going to put it in this entity package. I don't want named queries or that one, but I need a persistence unit because I haven't created one yet. So I want the fully qualified database table names and attributes, column names. Okay, this will allow me to use the entities to create a database if I want. I like to use lists instead of just generic collection, and finish. So as you can see here, it went to the database and created all of our entities. So look at the category one, which we had before. Here's table, name is category, scheme is store user. It did some named queries for me. So I can go in and look. So here's our ID field. This ID field is a generated value because we identified it that in the database. Its column name is ID, nullable is false, made it an integer ID. So here's our next field, a name field. It's not null, so it's required length of 100. Here's our description field, a string, length of 100. So this length is for the database table, has no restriction on the string. Now here's a different one. This category is related many-to-many to items through the item list entity. So this generated for me a list of items that would belong to this category. So anytime I load the category, I can get to the items inside it. Okay. I also have a parent ID. which gives me a category list. And this list is the children of me, basically. Then here's my parent. Instead of calling this parent ID, I'm going to rename it. So Control R. Change it to parent, that one, and rename the getters and setters. Okay, so now the other thing I want to do to this one is anytime I create a category, I want to be sure and initialize all of the lists that it has. So my item list is going to be equal to a new collections.empty list. I want to do the same thing with category list. Okay. This by default will be null for the parent, so that one's okay. I don't need these other constructors. I'll never use them as far as I know. If I need them later, I can add them back in. Okay, so here's my getters and setters. Now down here we have a hash code, which is based on the ID, which is good because our ID will be unique. And we have an equals, so you can tell if one object is equal to another one. Here we can fix that if statement a little bit if we want. So this will compare one category to another. If the IDs are the same, then they're the same. So this one we want to modify because we don't want it to say entity ID here. We want it to actually show the name of the category when we display a category. Okay, so categories there, all modified, should be good. We can go through and modify the same thing on all of these. We're not using these yet, so I'll put that off for a while. I'm going to go look at my libraries. Okay, in my libraries, I have Eclipse Link now. Eclipse Link is the JPA package that I'm using. Okay, so now I want to go back to my web pages. And in all my web pages, I'm going to get rid of the SQL code stuff. I no longer need this. Just get rid of it. I'm going to go to admin index. Nothing in there. It looks fine. So then we go to category index. And in my category index, instead of this category SQL, I'm going to implement a 3-layer system where I have the view. All of these JSPs are the view. These entities and the JPA part we're going to have is the data. And the controllers is going to be in between the view and the data. So it's a 3-level system. You can check that out in your book, how it's described there. Okay. So in order to do that, I need to have the JPA controllers. Another thing to notice in here is in our configuration files, we now have a persistence XML. This is the setup for how it's going to read the database. You can go to the source, and here's your database. Location, username, password, database driver. Okay, some other design things you can do. You can have the system create the tables, drop and create the tables, or do nothing, or doing nothing because we have current data in there. If you do drop and create, it will delete all of your tables and then recreate them. With create, it just goes and creates ones that are missing. Okay, so that's probably good enough for that at this point. Save those few little changes. So now I need to have I right-click on my source packages, new, JPA controller classes. Here's all of my entities that are currently in here. That's these. Add all of them. And under next, here's my project. This is where I want to put specifically JPA, so that all my JPA stuff is grouped under a JPA package. So hit finish and it generates some code for me. It generates JPA controllers and some exceptions that those might throw. So we want to look at the category JPA controller. So if you look in here, this is some of the entity JPA stuff, but here's a create. Okay. This is the same type of process as our insert, except we don't have to write the actual code for it. So we send a category to this as a Java object. It goes and does some verification, gets an entity manager, starts a transaction with the database, checks for a parent, checks for items that might be there, checks for children categories, and then this line does all of our database call. It actually does the insert of category. Okay. Then we go back and check some more stuff for all the relationships, and then close the entity manager after we commit the transaction. Okay. So if there's an error in here somewhere, this persistence gets rolled back. Here's edit. We can give it a category that we've loaded up and then modified. So we can change the name, the description, and so on. It does the same kind of checks, make sure everything is still good. Everything's looking good. It does a merge, which doesn't update with the database. Okay, destroy or delete. We can give it an ID. We don't need the whole category, just the ID. It starts and finds that category if it's there. If it's not in the database, so maybe someone else already deleted it, then it throws this exception, which is good. Otherwise, it sees if we have a parent. If there is no parent, it doesn't do anything. If there is, it removes us from the parents list, so we're no longer a child. Checks to see if we have items. Okay, if we have items, then it goes to the item and removes us as a category for that item. It goes to the category list and makes sure that all of our children are no longer our children. It removes us as their parent, so it sets their parent to null and unlinks everything and deletes us. Okay, down here are the selects, finding certain things. So here we can find all of the entities. Here's some modifications to that to get a certain set of results, so you can page through them. Here's one to find a specific category, given an ID. Okay. And this one gives us a count of how many categories are in the database currently. So we want to be able to use this in our program so that we don't have to write our own SQL.